Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and today it's time to talk to Gary Wayne again. Our subject will be Freemasonry in the Antediluvian times. Well, at least the roots of Freemasonry. So, Gary, welcome back. Good to see you.
Well, thank you for inviting me back, and so happy to be with you. And I think some of the topics that we cover are rather interesting, things that people haven't pondered about, and same with the topic today. So, yeah, thank you for inviting me back.
Yeah, boy, and do I know how to pick them?
Yeah, you're going to be on the #1 watch list pretty soon.
Yeah.
On both sides of the fence, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Honestly, my little channel.
Yeah,
I mean, let's be honest. How much harm can I do? It's ridiculous.
I know.
So, where to start? I would say let's start with the seven sacred sciences.
Yeah.
What is that, and why is that an important portion of the subject?
Yeah, the seven sacred sciences is kind of at the core of everything that we see happening today, not only in its application, but in its sort of philosophical dynamite, if we can put it that way. So it's an ancient sort of ideology, and for people who have not heard the term the seven sacred sciences, that's what they called it from the Antediluvian period or before the flood, but it's the same seven sciences of the liberal arts today. And arts and crafts are the same sort of version in terms of meaning in antiquity. And these are the seven sacred crafts or the seven sacred arts of the Antediluvian epoch. And so I'm going to now backstep just a touch and tell people a little bit about how they came about and why it's important to the ancient Masons, which is kind of an older and different term than Freemasonry. Freemasonry is Masonry light, if you could put it that way. So the ancient Masons are the ones who take their roots back into this history. So as the Masons believe, and I think, if somebody wants to get a really good book on part of the history, you get the History of Freemasonry by Adept Albert Mackey. He wrote in about the 1850s to 60s. You can also get some information out of the initiatory Bible that the Masons use. But I'm going to be referring to another thing that's called a Polychronicon that you can't really get today, but I'll explain that term later. So this stuff is, what I'm saying is, this is sort of available information, not necessarily as readily available on the Polychronicon part, but in most of their history, they teach this, and they teach it to their inductees, and they believe in it absolutely fully. So as the Masons believe, and the Gnostics, because it's a Gnostic organization, so the European polytheism, global sort of unification of the religions, as they would like to elevate their idea to, like the theosophy, or the religion of the only truth that's really true, so to speak. And theosophy is an extension of Gnosticism, designed for the end time, but they were a little bit ahead of themselves on their schedule by well over 100 years. So the story goes like this. So Adam in Eden is taught the knowledge from God. And he needs this knowledge because he is running a very large agricultural system in a very large area. It has 4 rivers in there, including from the Nile to the Euphrates, plus 2 other rivers. So it's a significant piece of property. It's filled with crops. It's filled with orchards. It's filled with trees, forests. It's filled with animals. It's filled with animals that are being raised in an agrarian sort of fashion. So then there's just Adam, and then sometime later Eve is created. So Adam is taught this volume of knowledge to be able to do this. We're not told he's given any help. This is the only help he's going to get is Eve. So this is the knowledge that Adam carries with him as he leaves Eden with Eve, not by his own volition, but by the things that he did to cause that. So this knowledge is then being transferred down the generations with the birth of Cain, Abel, and Seth. Of course, Abel is killed by Cain. Cain goes into full rebellion against God, and he leaves and he goes to Nod, where he builds a city. It's like a city for who, but that's a different sort of rabbit hole to go down to. But he has this knowledge to build the cities because he learned the knowledge from Adam. And he names the first city after Hanok or Enoch, which is his firstborn son. And for people who aren't aware of it, there's two Enochs. One is the son of Cain, one is the son of Jared in the Sethian line. And so this knowledge is developed by Enoch, son of Cain, aka the term Enochian mysticism, into 7 different disciplines to be developed by specific sort of groups and people so that they can advance it as far as they can. And this is the knowledge that is going to merge with the fallen angels or the gods. That's going to accelerate that epoch to a level to things that we're still trying to catch up to this day. And so it's these 7 liberal sciences, these 7 sacred sciences that then are going to be developed along with this merging knowledge, and it's going to marriage with the Nephilim that are going to be created in Genesis 6. That's going to be the sort of organizational structure for the world. So what Enoch does is he says, I can't allow this knowledge that we're going to develop to a whole new level be known or understood by people not worthy. In other words, the poor and the Sethian line, even though the Sethites would have had that knowledge, but they're not working on it in the same aggressive manner as the Cainites. And so what they're going to do is develop this mystery religion to house this knowledge. And that's the degrees that have developed. So 3rd degree in the old system, or the same as the York Rite versus the Scottish Rite, which is a 33rd degree first level adept, would be just sort of getting into the true knowledge of the sciences and the knowledge that was developed in the past. And so what they further developed was the mystery schools to educate the elite, the royal bloodlines, just as they did throughout history to control all of the knowledge. And so you have the system that's being developed, and within that mystery schools, you're going to see secret societies evolve. Just like you have beta houses, alpha houses, all sorts of names for these initiatory societies on universities today, because they have that ancient sort of history. And so this is the development of the first polytheist religion that's going to cross the flood. And it's going to develop the secret societies, and that information and knowledge is going to cross the flood. So the Masons have this tradition where Hermes finds the 2 pillars of Lamech, of the descendants of Cain, who wrote the location to the knowledge under the pyramids, and he's going to take it back to Nimrod. And they're going to institute Enochian mysticism there, to build Babel City, build Babel Tower, and everybody else sort of knows the rest of the story from there. So what's interesting is that it's the acceleration and that this heavenly knowledge builds on the 7 sacred sciences. But there's another part of the knowledge, which is the philosophy, which is their word for theology. Philosophy is the love of wisdom, or the love of Sophia, as you take that word back into Greek. And Sophia is the goddess of wisdom. She is the goddess of the pantheon who made in Gnosticism the 12 archons, which the God of the Bible is said to be part of in Gnosticism. And she provides all sort of life. She's right there as this sort of nebulous universal life force that would be her husband, that was used to create these 12 archons. And philosophy is believed to be superior to the 7 sciences. So it's the ideology behind what guides all of this knowledge. And philosophy comes from the first 3 sciences: grammar, rhetoric, and dialectics. And it's believed to be superior to the 7, and it is the arbiter between the 7 sciences. And it is sort of the the intellectual dynamite that's going to guide it for good or for evil. And it's the ideology of the philosophy of the absolute, or the supreme ideal, as they like to call it. And it's a supreme Unitarian concept that sort of goes back to that. We're all one with the universe, with that nebulous life force. That's the nebulous sort of partner to Sophia. And that this knowledge that they're developing, utilizing and guided by this philosophy, has the ability to destroy the world. It's that powerful, and has to be kept secret. And, so alchemy is kind of a part of the seven sciences, but it's more of an extension out of chemistry and a couple other sciences as well, probably like arithmetic. So for people who don't know what the seven sciences are, they are grammar, rhetoric, dialectics, arithmetic, geometry, which is also known as Masonry within the craft from which they take their name, music, and astronomy. And the Freemasons, receiving this knowledge as one of the secret societies that's lower on the scale, but the societies above it use the same information. They attribute Enoch as being their greatest patriarch, Enoch, son of Cain. He's the one who founds their religions, and thus Tubal-Cain, Nama, Jubal, and Jubal are also significant patriarchs and matriarchs of their knowledge-based religion. And so they're looked on very highly. And Nimrod is the first Grand Master of ancient Masonry. After the flood, he writes the first constitution that then passes over to, later on, to Heliopolis, will be the location and the development of these sciences later on.
So you said that Adam has been taught by God.
Yep.
And when I looked for information about that, there came up a lot of Muslim references and
really?
sources.
Yeah.
But so who said that God taught Adam? Because I couldn't find it. I searched on Bible Gateway and what have you. Yeah. So, but the majority.
So you can get it. You can get it in the book History of Freemasonry by Albert Mackey. And here's a quote out of it. I'll just read it. It's in Old English because it was first written down in Old English that way from other languages. It says, "Our purpose is to tell you how and in what manner this worthy science of Masonry begun. It's well worthy to be well kept for a worthy craft and a curious science, for there be seven liberal sciences, of which the seven, it is one of them, and the fifth is called geometry, and that teacheth math and the measure of the earth and all things, of which science is called Masonry." And then he goes on to say, how were these worthy sciences first begun? Before Noah's flood, there was a man called Lamech. And this Lamech had two wives, and one the height of Ada, and the other the height of Sela. And by his first wife Ada, he got two sons, and that one Jabal and the other Tubal. And by the other wife Sela, he got a son and a daughter. And these four children founded the beginning of all of the sciences in the world. And this elder son Jabal found the science of geometry, which is why he becomes one of their significant patriarchs. And he departed. I won't read off the rest of it. So that's their sort of summary accounting of it, as they like to talk about it. And that the Bible records part of that history, but not all of that history. And that history comes down in their oral traditions, which was penned in the 1300s into seven sort of separate kind of books that they say holds the universal history, and that it adds information in from other religions and other cultures, and that is called the Polychronicon. So until about 1350, it was a completely sort of oral tradition that was handed down within the secret societies, and then they finally decided that they should write it down but it's called the Polychronicon. And it's sort of multiple chronologies from around the world. It's a worldwide sort of encyclopedias, as they would call it.
Okay, because I was scratching my head and then I came to the conclusion, yeah, it's probably something that the Freemasons have as information. And yeah, exactly. I found the same sciences on a Freemason website: grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy. So now.
And to show you how strongly they believe in it as their source, at least in English writings, all manuscripts, and they have many different manuscripts out there, from the Regis to the Hallowell poem and on and on. I name a lot of them in my first book. They have what they call, what is written as a décant of the 7 liberal arts and sciences that introduce all of those manuscripts, all except for the Hallowell poem. So it's an important piece that they base that information on. But it's the development of that knowledge which is the real secrets, right? And that's what they want to be able to utilize and control, and not have it freely sort of available for everybody that's out there.
Okay. So then, the sons of Adam were familiar with these sciences. And yeah, Cain went bonkers. And so, but he took that knowledge with him. And is it fair to say that the corruption of that knowledge has its roots there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Cain became a very corrupt individual, and Enoch, even though the Masons would kind of conflate him with the holy Enoch out of the Sethian line, the 2 different people, and he was not doing it. I guess the separation gets to be is what's your definition of corruption, right? So I mean, on the one side you have polytheists that were developing this versus the monotheists that weren't developing it. So they would say they're developing it within the principles and the philosophy of their religion. The problem is with that is that you have a twofold dualistic system within polytheism. And what I mean by that is they have the sort of macro one where it's whatever you want to call the supreme being of the polytheist side against the God of the Bible. And it's a perpetual war that goes on forever. Nobody ever wins according to the polytheist belief. But within polytheism, you have sort of a micro dualism of good versus evil as well. You have good witches and bad witches, and witches are typically priestesses in polytheism. So witches to a polytheist would have a whole different connotation than to a Christian, for example. You have good magic and black magic. You have in the Bible knowledge of good, knowledge of evil. You have this ideology of good forces within polytheism and evil forces, and they're always at war looking for supremacy within the polytheist religion. They all worship the same pantheon, but you have good giants and bad giants, just like Hercules was a good giant and he fought against evil giants, right? This is a common understanding. And so you have what they would call a good force within polytheism that is trying to look after humanity as they believe, and you have another force that is not looking after humanity. I would submit neither are. One is just not as violent and corrupted as the other one. So within polytheism then is you have the development of this knowledge in 2 different agendas, maybe similar heading to the same as the final agenda, but in totally different ways.
Yeah. So now my question is, how do you corrupt arithmetic, geometry, or astronomy? I mean, here with grammar, rhetoric, logic, music, I can see that to
Yeah.
some extent.
Well, the
Uh,
thing is
but with,
knowledge,
can I
not,
just finish?
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
But with arithmetic, for instance, yeah, okay, you can, if you know how to, uh, you can convince somebody that the 2 + 2 is 5. But, then the whole system
Yeah.
doesn't function, and it
Yeah.
becomes clear
So,
that,
yeah, I got it. Yeah. So the issue is not that knowledge is evil.
no,
It's the
no, no.
it's the application that is either good or evil.
Mhm.
So, um, we don't want to say that they've corrupted the numbers because there's no evidence to suggest that it either adds up and it works or it doesn't. But they do things that take it to a whole different level and it's the application. So, for example, in math, which is what you're talking about, you have all sorts of geomancy and sacred numbers and things that they do within their belief system, and then what they do with it beyond that. So that would be how it becomes corrupted.
Okay, yeah, that's a very important point. I find that it is not that the science itself got corrupted in terms of everything was watered up or somehow fake, so that it is more the application. I think that is very important to understand. So, mm,
Yeah, and that's the absolute sort of key. So you can develop things into for like nuclear energy, right? But
yeah.
like everything in knowledge, it has a double-edged sword. You can use it to power for electricity as long as it's safely held and can't be, you know, wrecked so that it's going to be leaking, or you can make nuclear weapons
Mhm.
for
Yeah,
destruction,
yeah,
right?
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's always about how is it being used and the spirit of how it's being used.
Mhm.
And then if it's used to control people as opposed to free people, then it's not being used legitimately as well, right? So you're going to take things like with the first three sciences that leads to writing and philosophy and the words and the ideology. You have ability to do that in a good way that lifts people up, or you can do it in a way that deceives people or oppresses people.
Mhm. I saw a short clip because you said spirit, a short clip today. A yeah, Hebrew scholar, I would say. He was talking about the Ashtaroth spirit, and he said that the priests of Ashtaroth had these men dressed like women. They also, it went as far as sometimes surgically altering that particular human being, and they participated in same sex sexuality. And I thought, so he made the argument that we are once again are being confronted with that same spirit.
Yeah, I think
But on
it
a
may not,
larger scale.
yeah, on a larger scale, it may not be that specific one because all the different pantheons around the world are kind of the same, right? They have different vernacular names for the same gods. I know some polytheists might disagree with me on that, but if they're at the adept level, they know that that's the case. Um, you have a religion that is completely sort of, not completely, but significantly different than what's in Judaism or in Islam or in Christianity in terms of how they view certain things, right? And you get this sort of spirit of liberalism out of these liberal arts, out of that polytheist, but more as in a rebellion against the laws that the God of the Bible would impose. And then even as Jesus would have them imposed in the spirit of the law, as opposed to the legalism of the law, in terms of the intent. But they would do things that they would say, we're free to do that because that doesn't affect our ability to transcend through the various different beliefs in polytheism into godhood. They all sort of, whether it's reincarnation or whatever the process is that's what they're trying to do. And they're trying to do it in the physical world against the God that they believe to be the evil God, or what they would call Satan, right? And so they have a different set of things that they're prepared to want to promote, as opposed to the monotheist side. I would say that on either side, if it's not tolerant, as opposed, and not going to the point of what we see as tolerance as discrimination today, used in the inverse way, if it's not tolerant, it's being corrupted, no matter what, because the application ends up being sort of evil. And even within Christians, and I would tell Christians and monotheists, is that you can't impose your belief system on people. People either will want to believe in your belief system for what it says and how you apply it and how the whole religion applies it. So all the monotheist religions go sideways because they become more power hungry and control hungry in their application to control the people. So what you have is a complete takeover of the ideology and the spirit of what's supposed to be being done. And I think you have a similar thing that always happens in polytheism too. You may have on the one side maybe a higher sort of agenda, but it's that organized structure that always takes over, that brings in that antichrist spirit, that totalitarian spirit to do evil.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, my take on that always has been, yeah, if a guy wants to walk around in a mini skirt, high heels, and a beard, yeah, okay.
Well,
You know, then,
there's a belief that the gods were of both sexes, right? That they had traits of that. I'm not convinced they showed both traits. What they had the ability to do was take whatever gender they chose, and that sort of ideology as a spirit being that, you know, isn't really split differently, is being sort of transposed to, well, we should be doing what is done in heaven, and in polytheism that's the gods of the pantheon, and we should be taking whatever form we would like to take, whatever gender we would like to take.
Yeah. You know, I thought, yeah, okay, I don't think it's a good look for you, but if that is your wish, knock yourselves out.
Yeah,
The
just don't
only
force me.
thing,
Yeah, do it,
yeah,
but don't force me to do it. Yeah.
exactly, and there is where I draw the line. Yeah, this
Yeah.
insistence, everybody jump on the bandwagon. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, no.
And it's very interesting. Ashtaroth is, you know, that is the consort of Baal after the flood, and also the consort of El before the flood as the parent god. And Baal and Ashtaroth are credited in the Ugaritic texts of creating the demigods after the flood, the Rephaim, the giants after the flood. And Ashtaroth and Edrei was the two ruling centers, one for governance, one for worship, of King Og, the last of the Rephaim after the flood, in Bashan at Mount Hermon. So it's an interesting sort of connection in terms of that spirit of Ashtaroth, which is the spirit of that superior race and that superior knowledge of, and the development through polytheism that is sort of underlying that whole reference.
Oh, okay. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, when I look at Hey, when I looked up this subject, antediluvian masonry, um, you know, at first glance, it might seem that, oh, that's not possible. There is no
Yeah.
connection. Yeah, masonry, the Freemasons were founded here a couple of 100 years ago, and so on and so forth. But then actually you find that there is, what do they call them? It's the Royal Antediluvian Order of Buffaloes.
Yeah.
That's a lodge in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they have it right in their name.
They
Yeah.
do. They absolutely believe it. You know, and you're right. We see this ancient system that split up into multiple um, groups today, like Freemasonry, the Illuminati's above them, then the Rosicrucians, and it goes up that what they call the Thelemic tree. In their and those are the trunk organizations, and the formation of the Royal Society, which is the sort of recognized Western um, expression of the development of science outside the church that was squashing it, um, was created with a charter in 1662 officially, even though it has a start up in the 1640s. There's some political drama going on in England at that time with Cromwell and Stuart kingships, but it's certified as a society then. It's created by Rosicrucians and Freemasons at that time. And that is the first, that's where they're going to start the schools outside the church. They're going to develop all of the sciences. They called themselves the last of the sorcerers and the first of the giants. I mean, not giants, the first of the scientists. And who is it? I think it's Chris Lomas is a Masonic historian. You know, he wrote that in his book called The Invisible College, which the Royal Society is also called. And so these are the ones that are controlling the sciences even to this day, because all of the education and scientific societies today still answer back to that Royal Society. And these groups that make up that Thelemic tree today at the lower level, they were split into subgroups after the fall of the Templars in 1307. So the founding of the Templars in 1090 to 1099 were essentially all royal Masons, and Cistercian monks were two of them, but those were also bloodline nobility because all the priests were bloodline nobility within the Catholic Church, and they're renowned Cistercians as well. And so you have this bloodline group that calls themselves the ancient Masonry group that takes their bloodlines back into prehistory and their knowledge and society back through Heliopolis, back through Babel, and back to the Antediluvian epoch. So what you have is just a sort of a splitting up of that ancient Masonry society. So these societies have been part of our history, at least since the development of the sciences, but likely with the introduction of the royal dynasties and the noble elite with the Nephilim, and then the recreation of the Rephaim after the flood, that have controlled this information for their control ever since.
Yeah. Yeah, and here this buffalo, antediluvian buffalo order, I found it interesting. It says that the only requirements are true support and loyalty to the British Crown.
Yeah,
of course.
of course.
And the Constitution, and it was founded by entertainers and actors.
Yes, that's part of it. Yes. So it's an interesting, you have, and again, that's why you need to kind of understand the hierarchy. So you have masonry that with the branches going into the tree, they'll look after all of these smaller, lower level organizations and control them. And then as you move up the ladder, you would have, let's say into the Rosicrucians, you would have, and the Committee of 300, into that area, you're going to have like the Bilderbergers, you're going to have the Club of Rome. Those are the groups that are going to be sort of intersecting up there. So they all have a specific agenda that they're to operate at, and they have branch organizations that they work with through the trunk organization. And so it's always important to sort of understand that. And above the Rosicrucians are the bloodline Masonic orders.
Yeah. Now we have that cleared up. So,
Well, and I was going to say, that buffalo is more of an allegory. The adepts know what it's going to mean. A buffalo could be an ox, or it could be a bull, right? And of
bull,
course,
yeah.
you have the bull cult of the Antediluvian epoch, and also as it was represented in some of the Canaanite cults of Ashtaroth, with the two horns and things like that, and Moloch, which is either a son of Baal or part of the Baalim. He was, had the head of a bull. And so they have their imagery that sort of accompanies their names of their organizations and the imagery that sort of goes with it. And so one of the Royal Masonic organizations that sort of really collects it all together is the Knights of the Seraphim, and that's the Norse bloodline, high-level Royal Masonic group, and they have the seraphim and you can look it up for the Knights of Seraphim. They sort of have this sort of necklace that they might wear that has all of these seraphim sort of angels on there. Seraphim were the watchers, right? They're the ones that gave the initial knowledge in their belief system, and Azazel would be, the classic one of those watchers that they would be talking about. So yeah, all of that imagery will go back to some sort of angelic being and some sort of taciturn genealogy that's being implied. So if you see a unicorn, you see a lion, you see an eagle or a double-headed eagle, it's all got that information encoded into how their organization links in and sort of into what sort of bloodline, as with the coats of arms.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about coat of arms, and just briefly thought of Trump's coat of arms.
Yeah, I haven't looked at.
Have you ever seen that?
I haven't not looked at his coat of arms.
Yeah, there is a Freemasonry hand with a white glove
Oh yeah,
in
the
it.
hidden hand. Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes through a square.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, there are more things. So once type it in if you have a little
I
bit of
will.
time. It's
I
quite
will.
interesting.
Yeah.
So the Brotherhood of Cain, what is that exactly, and what role do they play in this shebang?
Well, there's been a lot of brotherhoods of Cain over time. So
Okay.
if it'd be helpful if you could zero it in, I could maybe talk about the ones that I know
Yeah,
about. Yeah.
so Cain had the knowledge. So
Yes.
does that mean Brotherhood of Cain that it already existed during that time? And then my follow-up question would be, do we still have Brotherhoods of Cain?
Well, there's a Gnostic group called Cainites or Cani,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was very popular around the time of Jesus and a couple of hundred years afterwards. Just as there was another group called Ophites, which is a group of the serpents or the seraphim. They sort of form that larger Gnostic sort of group. They're like branches of the same sort of order. So they will carry with them that herald organizations and bloodlines will carry with them that heraldic connection back, because it's important, again, even within the religion, as to what branch that they're going to be taking themselves back to. So yeah, you have the Cani, you also have this whole understanding of the word Kenite in the Bible, which is a patriarchless group of beings that aren't connected to the Kenaz in Genesis 36 because they predate the Kenaz Dukes of Edom that were hybrids, but not giants. So these Kenim, as I will call them, that word actually goes back to the word Cain. And they both mean smith and possessors and possession. So there's a connection there through some of these original giant groups after the flood that would somehow, either in spirit or in sort of heraldic sort of allegorical memory and in honor of, would take that sort of name, and peoples that would come out of them down the road would sort of carry that branch of knowledge, religion, and bloodline.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I misheard, but I heard the syllable keen, like as in Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, well, Anakin it could be from Cain, yeah, because of the Cain part on the end. And typically, you can spell it K-A-Y-I-N or Q-Y-N as you take it back to its original Semitic. And just as Q is the same letter for Kabbalah. Okay, it's pronounced with a K as we take that back to ancient Semiticism. And then that would make him Cain of heaven or Smith of heaven, because An is heaven in Sumerian, or it could be Cain of Anu. So an offspring of Anu, one of the Anunnaki, right? Just as Anakim is very similar to Anakim, which are the giants that are in the Bible. And there's a lot of people have done some work to say, well, that goes back to Anu of Sumeria as the Anunnaki. And it'd be Anunnaki, and it's just sort of a shortened transliteration of that. So there's a connection there for sure. And so anything that's sort of connected with Q and with Cain, it tends to have a connection to that ancient knowledge.
Yeah, okay. So, but a Brotherhood of Cain was operational during the time of Cain.
We don't have a written record of that.
Okay.
But Cain started a whole branch line of people. Cain was the first patriarch of that line, and that the things that Enoch did was in honor of his father, right? So Cain brought the first knowledge. So there's no reason to think that he didn't develop his own brotherhood. Enoch, his son, just took it to a different level and took it into subgroups.
Okay. Or maybe, some of these brotherhoods, that existed over time that had that name, maybe they just found it very attractive or,
Yeah.
with a deep, deep meaning that not everybody understands. And
yeah. So, I mean, within the Masonic Society, they believe their bloodlines go back over the flood, right? So that descendants of Cain, descendants of Nephilim survived the flood, and thereby will connect their bloodlines back that way. So, and biblically, I mean, we don't know how giants show up after the flood, only that they do. I think second incursion probably makes more sense because these giants are somewhat different, but you get, different kinds of giants after the flood. So, and in polytheism, you get lots of stories of giant survival. So, and I think the Epic of Gilgamesh actually talks about both survival and second incursion. So Gilgamesh after the flood, he is created after the flood. So is Enkidu or Enkidu, depending which translation that you're reading on his name. And he is the son of Lugabanda, king of Uruk, and Nin, the goddess, the fertility goddess, I think a bull goddess, to has sex with Lugabanda, and it creates Gilgamesh, and a similar sort of thing for Enkidu. Now, Utnapishtim is the Sumerian Noah, right? And he and his family all survived the flood. What's interesting about these characters is they are 2/3 God and 1/3 human. This is not a human story. This is a story about the demigods. So that recollections would suggest that there was both survival and or second incursion. But what we do know is polytheism, they like to take their genealogies back to patriarchs of Nephilim and Rephaim, both before and after the flood, and to parent gods before the flood, and then offspring gods after the flood as well. So they obviously have a strong tradition of survival to have those types of genealogies.
So I have this following quote from a Masonic website, and here it says, Noah is very important to the Freemasons as a second Adam, but some orders replaced him with Hiram, and I suppose that's Hiram Abiff, yeah?
Yeah,
So,
of Tyr, yeah.
Yeah, so
Well,
I,
no,
yeah, go
your
ahead.
question, no, your question first.
Yeah, what? I don't have the impression that Noah is so important, but maybe that's just me. I have the impression that other characters are much more pronounced, and as you said, Enoch
Well, in the
and who is this Hiram?
Okay, so let's start with Noah first.
Mm,
So Noah is a very important figure in Masonry as well, and
mhm,
he's talked about highly in Freemasonry and Masonry, and he's the one that they accredit with that is going to be sort of this guiding support for the development of the knowledge that Nimrod is using, because Noah was familiar with all of that knowledge. And so they accredit him as being a patriarch of the seven sacred sciences and its redevelopment along with with Nimrod, but not at the same sort of level of greatness as what Nimrod did. And so they accredit him with only bringing the good side of the seven sacred sciences. And then other people would have taken it in that dualistic sort of version in terms of the application. And
mm,
so they adopt them in, but they adopt most of the patriarchs into their belief system as well, documented and redefined differently than than the Bible would describe them. And that yeah, you would call him not the first grand master as Nimrod is, but the one who could verify the knowledge and develop it and sort of guide it. Hiram, he's a character, in the time of King David and Solomon, and he's
mhm,
going to provide the building knowledge and technology and masons to go to help Solomon build the first temple.
mhm,
And so Hiram, though, is a patronymic name, and it's a name of kings in the Phoenician dynasty. And in Masonic lore, there's this knowledge of building that built the great pyramids before the flood and the great mega sites before the flood that is rediscovered after the flood that Nimrod's going to exercise to build Babel City and Babel Tower. And this knowledge is going to be going down through the mystery schools that Nimrod is developing in that polytheist religion, and are going to be continuing to develop this. And Pythagoras becomes a significant sort of patriarch of this knowledge and the development, in particular, music, but also his mystery schools develop more than music. They're really focused on the building trades as well. And so this knowledge of Pythagorean building knowledge is going to handle the ancient building knowledge that comes down through the ages. And so it goes to first the Dionysian builders, and then will be passed on later to King Hiram and the Phoenician dynasty of this building tradition that is going to be passed on to Solomon. The Pythagorean school is still going to control most of that knowledge, and it's going to come down to the Roman collegia in the Roman times, and they're going to build the great buildings like the Colosseum and other places based on this knowledge in the Pantheon. And then at the rise of Christianity, the Roman collegia is going to be a home for a lot of the Augustine monks, the Cistercian monks, and they're going to continue to build within these polytheistic groups within the church of the Roman church. The church is for them. So you get these, you know, sort of squat sort of style of stone churches and things like that. But by the time of about 1100 and the time of the Templars and the time of them excavating in Jerusalem, they find this knowledge and bring back this building knowledge that Solomon had passed on to him, that starts the great Gothic cathedral explosion and reinvention of building. That's all tied into that ancient knowledge that comes down through history. And of course, the Templars took over those builder groups, those Mason groups, and you know, were the ones that were controlling what types of buildings were going to be built thereafter and controlled them until their demise.
I also read an article about a Muslim becoming the Grand Master of a Jewish lodge. And yeah, and exactly there I thought, yeah, and that is how it works. Yes, these people all have their religion, yeah, the official denomination, but once they enter into their secret societies,
Yeah.
none of that matters anymore.
No, because you have in Islam not only the Shia and the Sunni, but you also have Sufism, which
Yeah.
is the polytheist version, and it influences the monotheist version. Similarly, in Judaism, you know, you have Kabbalism and you have the Essenic religion from Heliopolis. That was, you know, part of, and the Essenes, they actually had priests on the Sanhedrin, like they had royal bloodlines from the time of Moses, and for priest lineage. And so you have polytheism within Judaism, and one would suggest that even though they have some peculiar slants on things, the Pharisees and the Sadducees would be, you know, the monotheist version. And then within Christianity, you have the Gnostic Christians, right? They just have a different view of what and who Jesus was, as it fits into their belief. And they influence all of the monotheist religions. But you can be, in their terminology, in their double entendres, you can be a Christian, but it's a Gnostic Christian. And as a Gnostic Christian, you're a sect of the Gnostics. And so you can be part of those secret societies. And same with the Sufis and same with the Kabbalists. And they're a part of that merging of that global Gnosticism that I talked about, that they want to bring back the ancient religion that's unified under one understood same pantheon.
So the word usually is that anybody can join.
Yes, but not become an adept.
Yeah,
That's reserved for the people that they choose, and usually you have to have a bloodline. And typically in these organizations, you don't just join; they invite you to join, but they will accept other people to give that veneer of this society that does good things, and they do. So it doesn't matter whether or not it's Freemasons or it's the I'm trying to think of the group that sponsors hospitals and stuff. They have the Islamic tassels and stuff. They're Shriners. They do good
Shriners.
things on the surface, and they interact in the business community and politics, but only the adepts. To become an adept, you pretty much have to be a bloodline. Now, some people have told me you can become first degree adept, but you're not really going to go any further. So some people will say that sort of caps out somewhere at the adept level, perhaps at the Illuminati level, let's say 5th or 6th degree, but certainly not you're not going to be part of the Rosicrucians, at least at the upper level, which is 50% of the upper side is all bloodline. So somewhere that siphons out.
That is so interesting. I just, because of this subject, I Googled a little bit if there are any Rosicrucians around me here, where I live. Yeah, yes, of course. The next cities here, they have, everybody is welcome. We don't care what religion you have. Yeah. And then they, you go to the website of the particular city, and but you do not really get a lot of information. They announce their meetings, which is called temple service. You do learn it has something to do with being quiet, and also inner and outer quietness. Yeah, and that during the temple service you have the opportunity to visit the temple, to go into it. But that's basically it. And I thought that is a weird suggestion that who is attracted to that?
Yeah. Well, the ideology behind it is to get to adepthood because you're going to receive significant knowledge. And the lower enticements will give you mostly misinformation, but it will give you contacts. So you can benefit personally, you can make business contacts, political contacts, religious whatever sort of contacts that you might be sort of looking for. But it's that ideology that if you want to go somewhere in this world, you're going to have this knowledge, and B, you're going to have to find a way to be permitted to have your offspring intermarry with bloodlines to ennoble those bloodlines so they can have a larger role in the future world. Now, roll that forward to people, let's say like Bill Gates, who have made a lot of money. He may or may not have any bloodlines. If they are, bloodlines are probably very, very weak. But he works with these organizations. Like he goes to the Bilderberger meetings, he gets his marching orders, or he works with the Committee of 300, gets his marching orders, but he's not part of the bloodline group that oversees it. That's for the royals. But what he will get is the ability to have his offspring intermarry with what they call the pseudo blue bloods in North America to try and graft in and ennoble over generations to have a larger role.
Yeah, the same what the Rothschilds and the Rockefeller did.
Yeah, exactly.
Over the years, yeah.
Yes, same ideology. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at some point in time, they would be considered, part of maybe midstream bloodlines, but never will they be up with the royal families. Never.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. So, Gary, our first hour is already gone. And that was the public hour about antediluvian Freemasonry. Until next time, goodbye. And we see the patrons on the other side.